Hey there, podcast buddies. How you doing today?
So fucking excited.
Season 4, we're here.
We're doing it. We're doing it.
It's so exciting after what feels like years of a dead, cold, long winter without Handmaid's Tale to guide us in the shitstorm that was 2020. It is finally back and we're over the moon to be able to to geek out about it again. It's exciting and it's nerve-wracking because we haven't talked about any new material in a long time. We've just been going back and rewatching old episodes, and even when we were doing our Testaments book club, it was all stuff that we could go back and reference and flipping books, and this is such a different experience, and it's really exciting to be back in this. So we hope that you are as pumped as we are.
Speaking of a different experience, this has been a different experience for us. So, couple things about how we're going to be doing this moving forward this season. As far as this episode, we haven't seen episode 2 or episode 3. We will definitely be going through one episode at a time, podcasting that current episode that we've watched before we move on, because my brain can't wrap our head around not spoiling stuff. So, if you have not watched episode 2, don't worry, because neither have we. That being said, we are recording this episode on April 12th because we got the episodes early. And that has saved our lives because I still feel like we don't have enough time to get through these episodes before April 28th when 3 of them are going to come out. But thank God we have them early because that was an experience last year that I don't really want to relive.
Oh, that was a waking nightmare. I don't think that any of us slept for that entire weekend.
And then those episodes went away and we never saw them anyway. So that was fun.
Yeah, because that's what happens when you don't know what you're doing.
Yes. Any new listeners, welcome, because I know we're bringing in a lot of new listeners right now. If you're looking for season 3, episode 1, or episode 2, or season 3, episode 4, those just don't exist.
Yeah, long backstory to that, but they did exist. Now they no longer exist for reasons.
Yeah.
Very good reasons.
So here we are on April 12th recording this first episode. But one of the things that's a little different with these screeners that we get access to, there's no subtitles. So
yeah,
there's a couple times where we're a little bit in the dark. So forgive us if we're a little confused about something that seems pretty obvious in the subtitles. We can't see them. So we're just going off of what we can hear, which for my ears isn't that great, as you will find out shortly when I tell you about the drink that totally doesn't tie into the episode because it actually was never said in the episode.
But you thought it was. I mean, that's pretty close. In your mind, you heard that.
If you are one of our new listeners, thank you so much for joining us. We're really stoked that you're here. A quick rundown as to how we do things. We will be effusive for a few moments about how we're feeling about the episode. We'll talk about either a drink or multiple drinks or wine that we feel like ties in properly to the episode, because we like to drink while we're watching this because we should be afforded some joy in this dystopian hellscape. And then we swan dive into analyzing the show for about 17 hours roughly per episode, but then we narrow it down to for 3 hours for your listening sake.
Yep.
So
I've got 2 things for anybody that's new around these parts. We swear a lot.
Mm-hmm.
That's all. You're definitely just going to have to deal with it. 2, I really wanted to thank our longtime listeners that are still poking around. Like, one that comes to mind is Of Yoga Pants.
Mm-hmm.
Man, love you, Of Yoga Pants.
Yeah.
Also, our tried and true Dawn, thank you for always being there with us. All of the Patreon people that have stuck by us. Yeah. We didn't really think that people were going to stick with us in an off season, and here we are. And so thanks for sticking with us when we were trying to figure out the growing pains of distance recording because of COVID, because you're looking at 3 seriously technologically inept people, but we've learned a lot.
Yeah.
But when being confronted with hey guys, now you got to distance record, we're like, oh shit. It's been a challenge, but we're in a really good place now, and we are off like a herd of dusty turtles now.
One of the benefits to learning how to remote record has been that we have video, and we now have a sparkly new YouTube page, which I think has really helped our numbers, so we're excited to see what happens there, but that's a new facet. That being said, we will still have our full podcast episode analysis up a day before anything full episode is on YouTube.
Before we jump in, any big thinky thoughts that you want to talk about, or do we want to just swan dive into this?
So many big thinky thoughts, but I'm into the swan dive.
Yeah, I can swan dive.
Does anything make you feel more safe and secure when you're just leaving a battle scene than the song "Say a Little Prayer for You"? Very appropriate, very farcical. I loved that we immediately jumped into where we left off. There was no delay. There was no like flash forward several months later. That was so welcomed because we had originally expressed concern about even them flashing forward like a week or a couple of weeks, but no, like we are immediately thrust right into that. Like we see June's wound, we see the blood, like we see what's happened like right in the aftermath of what they eventually start calling the Angel's flight.
That was something else, man. When we do hear say a little prayer and June is being transported, the first thing I thought was she's bleeding like a pig.
Oh,
Mhm.
interesting.
Yeah, that was the first thing that I thought of, was, a pig slaughter, just because there was a lot of blood. Janine's talking, we hear copters, June can't make out what she's saying. And then I'm like, are they in a Sephora? It looked like they were in a Sephora or something. And I'm like, grab some shit before you leave, ladies. I kind of really thought this was interesting how they're having this conversation about where they're gonna go. Apparently the Martha network is hooking them up. They're looking for a safe house. June thinks that she's still in a position to give orders. And Janine seemed like she was really taking an active role here, and I thought that was pretty awesome. It's just not the role I expected her to take. We don't usually see her in that, just, I don't know, that like stepping up delegating kind of way. And I was like, I'd want to work a large party with you, Janine. That's how I felt, given Janine's background, and we're all like restaurant workers.
Yeah, definitely.
And damn, like talk about like I've actually loved this. I was like, look at her. She is cauterizing her with a goddamn flair. She's the flair. If that is not some restaurant improv, I don't know what is. That is exactly what I got out of this.
It was insanely clever. Like, whichever one of them decided to go to a beauty supply store and to look for, which is insanely clever to go there and look for a curling iron, which curling irons I will burn you in the best of times anyway.
It was a curling iron, not a
It
flare?
was a flare and a curling iron. You're right.
Oh, okay.
They used the flare to heat up the curling iron because there was no electricity, which, holy clever. Like,
oh, love that.
But what I really loved about this is that when like we're hearing say a little prayer and like everything's kind of fuzzy and hazy and everything's moving in slow motion, when June finally opens her eyes, the first person she sees is Janine. I think it was a very intentional choice. I feel like they're really going to be focusing extremely heavily on June and Janine's relationship as season 4 progresses, which we got a lot of that in this episode, but I think that was a very intentional choice to have her not just see all of them, but to have Janine be the first one that comes into focus. I think that was foreshadowing for the way season 4 is going to go.
I like the way they did that shot too with the eye. It reminds me a lot of how Hulu has been putting out these like little tiny trailers on their like social media, and they all start with whatever character it is, and then you zoom into their eye and you go back through all the like flashbacks, and it reminded me so much of that with this scene and the eyeball. It was just really interesting the way they shot it. But I love the song in the beginnings playing out leading into that eye shot, because I mean, we said it at the end of season 3, and we've definitely joked about it when we were talking about our season 4 like prediction stuff, that we kind of chuckle and say, of course June is alive, right? And so I feel like that song being so farcical, like you said, Roxy, is just kind of that like little nod of, yeah, say a little prayer for our protagonist because she's just been wounded, but it's June. We know she's gonna survive. She's got to survive this, so let's move on. And I think this episode, they really leaned into her injury in a way that they didn't gloss over it and be like, okay, she's fine, she's cauterized, let's move on, we have things to do, story to tell. I mean, at least through this whole episode, that injury is prevalent in every scene that June's in. So I'm glad that they did it that way, but that's what I really picked up with the song, is it's just so happy. And then you get that eye shot, and it shifts your perspective, and now you're June seeing everything, and it brings you right back into exactly what you were saying, Roxy, where we left off. And the sound effect was really cool. It sounds like a gunshot, and then the song just completely goes away.
You get the sirens, the flare, she's bleeding everywhere, like you said, Scarlett, like a stuck pig. and they have to hold her down and like muzzle her to cauterize the wound. It's absolutely setting the scene that season 4 is going to be a much more intense and visceral, and very much making it seem as that like pulling us into a war scene sort of scenario. I loved this this sense of tone of just like, oh no, like we get it, like June's alive, like we understand that this probably wouldn't happen, but since it is happening, here's what we're thrusting you all into. I thought it was really brilliantly done.
And it goes very nicely into the next scene when they're actually on the move and they're going by this muddy, snowy field and they're hiding in this like secret compartment of this truck. And it is so terrifying, like when they're stopped and you hear these men's voices turn the engine off and they need to be so quiet, and Brianna's there. And I don't think that this is the kind of trouble that Brianna is used to. We haven't really seen her being involved in this kind of thing. And this is like a whole brand new ride for her. And June, even in her state, is trying to prevent her from losing her shit. Like, it's kind of like Brianna could definitely go the way of Janine right now. Like, we've seen Janine kind of like lose her shit in past episodes. And June is that calming, motherly, it's gonna be okay. We got this. Just be quiet. I'm gonna walk you through it. My heart was pounding like right out of the gates and right into this.
Yeah, it was very tense, and I had to just keep telling myself they can't get caught now. Like, this is just too early in this episode. Like,
we're 2 minutes in.
Like, please, like, this is the biggest criticism the show gets, is she gets out and gets caught in 5 seconds. Please don't let it be here. Like, that was how I reassured myself that everything was going to be okay in the scene.
But wouldn't that just be a perfect fuck you to all of those critics too? Like, hey, they have a chance of getting out, and now they're getting caught back in again and again and again, because that's what we're doing. Fuck you guys. Like, it's really hard to escape the Underground Railroad sort of vibes too of anything like this when you're literally trying to run north to escape this tyrannical government that would see you enslaved. Like, and we're in these are all Bostonian girls. Like, none of this message was really lost on us, so I don't really want to like go too heavy into that, but I thought it was really fitting that they would show this sort of like smuggling of humans to try to get across the border. But no, Scarlett, I'm with you on that. Like, hearing those boots slowly and heavily clomping about, very hard to not feel anxious in that moment, even though like we knew that they would escape.
I didn't know that. I really didn't.
I had every confidence of that because going back to those the Instagram little like character blips, they showed a lot of what was happening, and they showed like Aunt Lydia saying like she's pervaded your men for 19 days, and like, and in my head I'm like, it hasn't been 19 days. We can assume because like she's still healing, and I don't think that they would capture her and then not tell Aunt Lydia or the commander's tribunal. I was like, and they also wouldn't throw something like that in that's going to be happening like on episode 8. Like, I feel like they're just going to throw as much of episode 1 in to those little trailer blips. So like when I saw that, I was like, this is to build tension. This isn't going to actually be happening.
Oh, you are better than me. I couldn't apply logic to the situation. I was just scared. I really don't. I think I'm like Brianna. I don't really do well in situations like this.
I wonder what I would do if I was in a situation like this, and all I know is that I do much better when I know it's coming, because I'm ready to fight. When you tell me there's going to be a fight, I'm ready. I'm here for it. Like, my body gets primed, and I'm here. But in moments where I've been caught off guard, I am one of those people that like gets very lightheaded and weak-kneed. Yeah, it's so pathetic. For all my talk, when it actually like happens, my body's physiological response is the flight. It's all about the flight. Yeah, it sucks. I have no control over it. I literally like paralyzed, lightheaded. I could go down. I'm going to be useless in this situation. And god damn it, doesn't that suck? Because if I were to make it out of a Gilead situation, I'm pretty sure I could at least get us to the border. I've got plant knowledge. I got all sorts of, skills. I wouldn't make it that far. I know I wouldn't. I would drop dead at the sound of a gunshot.
It's fine. As long as we were together, we would be fine, because I'm the exact opposite. Like, if I have time to plan and think, anxiety brain kicks in, and I'm just like, oh my god, there's so many options and opportunities for this to get fucked up, and I would just collapse into like a fit of like anxiety entropy. But if something happens to me suddenly, I have the fight instinct. Instantaneously. Like, I'm just like, I will cut a bitch. I will murder someone. And then after the fact, then I get lightheaded. I'm just like, oh, that was a lot to handle. Now the anxiety brain's going to kick back in. So
Wow.
we'd be fine.
Okay. We
And then
complement each other.
Yeah, Marjorie can just keep us grounded all around.
I'll tell you who I am, but it's coming up later in the episode. It's funny that we're having this conversation because this entire episode is framed through very early on. I rabbit holed into, oh, that's who I am. Oh, shit. That's totally who I am. So we'll get there. But you know what I really liked about this scene with Brianna is the way that June was able to really sternly but also lovingly get her under control. And it's what I think what I'm most excited for in this season, because I see it so much in this episode. From season 1 through season 3, we've kind of seen this growth in June. To season 3, we finally got to really see her take hold of this leadership role, and it was rocky, and we've seen the ups and downs of her trying to figure out how to fit into this role in Gilead. And I think so far in this episode, leadership comes just so naturally to her. It's second nature. There's not a question anymore. I feel like everything that we've seen her go through has been this trial by fire, and I am really excited to see what we get out of her in season 4, because I feel like she's just primed for a really good fight.
I agree with you that leadership comes naturally to her. I think that she would do well to remember that it doesn't come naturally to other people. We see that later. We see that a little bit later in interactions that she has with Alma. That is definitely one of her shortcomings as a leader, is almost expecting everyone else to be on the same page as her immediately.
Yeah, no, I think that might be a big, I mean, I don't know if we'll carry it through the season, but I feel like that's going to be what she's learning now. Whereas I think season 3, it was a lot of acting irrationally and not really thinking things through. And now I think, I don't know, we'll see more of it. But I just think that all through season 3, we kept talking about her as like that Godfather-esque boss. And now it's just such a stride for her. Like, it doesn't, you know what I mean? It's not even, it's just June. That is June to me now.
She's in the uncomfortable and often very contentious position of being somebody who takes action when other people don't. And we spend a good chunk of season 1 reflecting on how they ended up in a Gilead situation because nobody took action, or they didn't take action until it was too late. And all the times that people were talking about slippery slopes regarding women's rights and, stuff like that, this is what they were talking about. Now they're in a position where they can't afford to act, and everybody ends up having a role. And June just eventually slid into that role. And like, she's powerful, she's pragmatic, she's compassionate, and she's human. Like, are these things not ideal in a leader? Season 3 was contentious because she really wasn't operating at her best. I finally just finished my season 3 rewatch a couple nights ago, and I'm like, holy Christ, no wonder why she went the way that she did. I don't know if I would have gone a different way given that explicit set of circumstances. I can't really fault her for anything. What is she supposed to do? This is what a leader has to do, and in a place like this, nothing is going to seem ethical or moral.
Right.
There isn't ethical and moral anymore.
Right. Well, that's what I think they were doing in season 3. That's what I really appreciate in hindsight, is watching her make those tough decisions and having that conversation, because we went back and forth a million times on different choices that she's made and what would we do in that situation. And at the end of the day, it's not so much what we would do in that situation, it's that she was in that situation and had to make a choice, and now she has to live with the choice she made. And that's what we've seen her have to do, is figure out how to live with those choices and correct. I think we see a correction in this episode from a misstep in season 2 with Eden. So I'll get to that later.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, and I'm glad that you're already thinking it too. So anyway, so the trunk restarts and they start to carry on, and you must have both felt super relieved, as I know I did, when you noticed that the field moved slowly at first and then rolled back up to a normal highway speed, like that little sliver of the field that she could see. Yeah, it went from being able to clearly be able to discern Rose to just a blur of white that lets you know that they are they are officially undetected and they are out from away from those commanders. And then we cut to everyone's favorite mood ruiner.
Doom Heels is back. Doom Heels is back. I mean, Serena
looking very disheveled. Her hair is unkempt. She hasn't brushed her hair. Like, and every time we see Serena, her hair is perfectly laid, if not perfectly put up together. She's dressed very pristinely, but in this, she looks like she's wearing like a loose-fitting sweater. That's a weird look for her. She's smoking a cigarette. What is happening here? Her hair looks a little frazzled. It's very clear that this is not the Serena that we are used to, and this is a Serena that I can get behind.
Right?
I'm enjoying this Serena because she is all sorts of fuck you today. I love that because Twello tells her, I'm afraid there's no smoking in here, Mrs. Waterford. And she's like, you kind of charged him with smoking? Like, no.
And then she puts the cigarette out on the ground.
Yes. And look at her face. Like, we rarely get to see that kind of insolence towards a man coming from someone like Serena. And it's great. I kind of loved it.
That was the first thing that jumped out at me before she even had any of that interaction with Fred or Twello, was just from her appearance, you could tell she was already done with Gilead. She's wearing pink. Like, you couldn't get further away from that wife blue. Is this pale pink. She's wearing pants. She's still got the Doom Heels. But like you said, Roxy, her hair's a mess. Like, it is just, it's not the Serena that we've seen. And she seems to be quite happy with her newfound liberties.
Even though she is, imprisoned.
Still better than Gilead.
Bingo. Because at least this is a physical prison as opposed to both a physical and a mental prison. And the snark is strong with her with all of both of her interactions with Fred and Twello as well. Like, Fred enters with his blessed day. You look tired, Serena, and she's having none of this. And then Twello enters and she's like, well, gentlemen, I think you're both in the wrong place. And to see her jump so quickly and readily into snarkily speaking to two men in positions of power over her is so refreshing. I was just like, this is the Serena I want to see for the rest of the season. Of course, we're not going to get that, but it's so nice to see in the moment. Especially when, Fred responded to something Twello said, and Serena snaps, don't speak for me.
Yeah, before that, though, you know what really jumped out at me? And it might just be that she didn't really have enough time to react to Fred before Twello came in. But Fred comes in with, so Serena, from what we can see with her appearance, has really given up Gilead. And Fred comes in with those Gilead pleasantries. And obviously, he's a very clear reminder of her Gilead life. But he comes in with blessed day. And I just don't think that that's anything she wants to hear. But so we talked a lot in the rewatch about how much abuse Serena has gone through with Fred in this relationship. She is in a highly abusive relationship, and we're not that far off of a lot of the abuse. And I think when he comes in, the fact that she doesn't respond to him made me think that he still has that presence over her just by using those Gilead words. And he makes a comment about how she looks. And it could have just been that she didn't have enough time to have a comment before Twello came in, but it was interesting to me that Twello comes in with the same kind of authority over her, but he says good morning, and it's just so different because he's Twello and not Fred. Thinking to me, that just made me think that that's why she was able to stand up to Twello, because she remembered that she is somewhat on the same playing field, whereas with Fred, she just instantly feels like she can't even speak without thinking through what she's saying.
That's a really solid point, which they double down on by which we can double down on by the tail end of the scene with her last words of the scene, but we'll get there in a second. And I love that you're pointing out that he said to her that you look tired, and that is absolutely a psychological power play. It's exactly the sort of thing that someone who is mentally abusive to their partner would say in an attempt to undermine their own feelings of self-worth when they notice that they're feeling confident. Especially bold words, considering Fred looks like he hasn't slept in 3 weeks. His shirt is all kerfuffled, and he's not wearing a blazer over his shirt and suspenders. He is not looking like his usual pristine self either. But for him to say to her first, you look tired, if she were to comment on his appearance, it would come across as a character attack on him. If she says nothing, then she falls back into that same psychological abuse. So damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah.
And it's that Fred spin of it doesn't matter how he looks, he's going to walk in like he looks like he's $1 million.
Exactly.
Bingo. Yeah.
That's what irritates me so much about him is that he says this because he knows it gives him that little dig at Serena, that just little push to make sure that she knows that he he can say that to her and that he feels the need to point that out to her. Like he wants her to know, like, hey, yeah, you look tired. I want to rub that in. And I just hate him. He just carries himself with that same kind of swagger. I want him to be humbled for once. Like humbled so it shakes him to his core. Like I want him to feel like he's been ground down to a powder. I want him to feel helpless. I want him to experience all the things that he has made everyone around him experience. And putting that into words, I now understand why I felt the way I did at the end. I'm really coming to terms with the fact that because like realizing in this episode, like I am not a saint and I don't think I would be a very benevolent person at all in my handling of any of this.
So as Twello's talking with them and as Serena bites back, like when Fred does try to speak for her, as you know, he is prone to do, because that's how he has always operated. Twello starts telling them about why their lawyers' meetings have been pushed back, and Serena's being snarky about like, oh, my rights are already being infringed upon. And once they hear the reason, she seems less apt to be so frustrated. With her response of, I'm sorry, did you say 86 children? When Twello tells them that a plane landed from Gilead, or took off from Gilead and landed at Pearson, with 9 Marthas and 86 children. And that he can't say more than that. We just know that they're here in Toronto and they're safe and they're being reunited with their families right now. And Fred immediately starts putting that propaganda spin. Serena is relatively silent during this. She's just absorbing this information, which I love because like she understands the complexity of the notion of these children don't belong to these people of Gilead, but also like I feel like she's like, I can't imagine what those families are going through, and that's it. It could be interpreted either way. Whereas Fred is immediately just like, you'll return those children to Gilead where they belong. Like, you'll do the right thing. This is going to start a war. And immediately putting that Gilead propaganda spin onto it.
Yeah, I feel like there was just a half a beat before Fred was able to apply that PR filter where they did a quick shot of each person's face as they took in the news. And it really just jumped out at me that, I mean, these 3 people in this room could not be more different in every way. Like they all have different motivations at this point. And the one thing they could all agree on is the magnitude of this feat that June just accomplished, because it stops Fred in his tracks. Like he's like 9 Marthas, apostates, it's fine, whatever. 86 children, like it's just mind-boggling no matter which way you spin it. So it was really cool to be able to see them get that news. Was very gratifying as a viewer for me.
I really appreciated the wordplay in this whole conversation, since like they walk in really, but especially around the part where Serena looks at Fred and says they're poor families. And I'm like, oh my God, Serena, for fuck's sake. And then Twello tells her they're being reunited with their families. So like, let's chew on that for a moment. She does have a point, because for some of those kids that just got smuggled out, this is the only family that they can remember. And if they can't be reunited with what's left of their biological families, like what then? This transition is going to be painful and scary for many of these kids. Gilead managed to fuck up an awful lot of kids. Not all those kids are going to be reunited with their families because their families are either dead or they're still in Gilead. But kids are resilient and hopefully they end up in good homes, not in Gilead. But even then, that's not a guarantee of love and safety, because in Gilead as elsewhere. And also, those 86 kids, you know what? I'm totally on board with there being 86 kids and not 52, because coming off of the season 3 rewatch where they're like, yeah, the 52 muffins and stuff like that. And then when they were going through the woods in that scene, I was like, God damn, it's an endless caravan of children. Okay, I'm on board with the 86 kids. Cool.
Yeah. There were multiple YouTube comments that all came through with the exact quote from season 3 that we were forgetting, which was Beth comes in at one point, looks at the room and says, that's a lot more than 52.
Yeah.
So, there you have it. Thank you, Beth. It's officially
Yes.
86.
And thank you, Power of the Internet, for pointing it out for us.
Fred's concerned this will start a war. There is something happening in his face. He is genuinely like, oh shit, on his face. And I liked that because I like it when Fred's uncomfortable. And Twello says they're doing everything they can to avoid that, but their priority is the well-being of the children. And Fred's like, cool, and you're going to send them home, right? And Twello's like, yeah, I'd like nothing better. But their homes are gone because you destroyed them. Mic drop.
Felt so good to just watch him say it to his face. Like, it doesn't really move its mark in Fred at all, but it was nice, again, as a viewer, to have someone say it out loud to Fred.
And then for them to find out that it was June.
Yeah.
When they say that it was a former handmaid, June Osborne, they're both speechless. And like Fred leans in, like he can't believe this. He is surprised every time by her, and I will never understand why. Oh, wait, no, I will understand why, because Fred is a pompous, misogynist, male chauvinist douchebag.
Yep.
That's why. But I will never stop being disappointed in people. I don't know. It just happens to me again and again and again, and that's just my own personal thing.
Fred will never be able to fully appreciate what June is capable of because she's a woman, and also because, as far as he's concerned, as we've seen time and again, she exists only as an accessory to him. She exists only as a plaything to him. Even in season 3, when they're presenting all of the handmaids to Winslow, and he approaches June. He's like, "Hey, how you doing? I missed you. We should like hook up sometime, like since we're both in town, like maybe get a drink and catch up." It had that same sort of vibe of it, where it's just like Fred is so almost intentionally obtuse about who June is as a human being and who Serena is as a human being, because they only serve him insofar as being accessories to him. As soon as they stop serving him, they don't exist. Or they can't exist as their own independent entities.
Yeah, I was wondering if his reaction was more of the fact that he was thinking about how this suits him. I mean, I definitely could see surprise, but he's so quick with his spin that I think at this point he is fully just thinking of how this is going to be his get out of jail card.
Mm-hmm. Which the same thought crossed my mind as well, because I was like, what are the ramifications of telling them before they can meet with their lawyers? Like, that's going to give Fred the opportunity, even if it's just a few hours, to start hatching and formulating a game plan for how to, exactly like you said, Marjorie, how to spin it in his favor. Meanwhile, Serena's looking less at that, and she's looking absolutely chuffed at the notion of it being June. She's surprised at first, but then once Twello leaves them to their own devices, Fred says they're going to hunt her down and they're going to kill her. And he looks genuinely concerned for a brief moment, because we know he views June as like his property / illicit lover, where things are like mutually consenting. We all know that's bullshit. Serena looks so pleased, so absolutely pleased. This gentle smile curls across her face, and then she offers like what would be a Gilead placation. May God have mercy on her soul. Thank you.
May God show her mercy.
May God show her mercy. Thank you. An absolute like Gilead placation.
Help me with this. Do you think that it was vindictive, or is she admiring the shit out of what June did? That is a huge feat. And I really feel like it wouldn't be lost on Serena what an epic undertaking that is to do that.
No, I only read that as that epic undertaking. Impressed. I did not read that as vindictive at all.
What a surprise that we would see it differently. I took it as vindictive, because as much as we like to credit that Serena has made progress, as far as her viewing with June, we have to go back to what I keep thinking back to is the last time that they have a face-to-face interaction, in front of the Lincoln Memorial, and they're just going to town with bars with each other. I think that's the last time that they're face-to-face with each other.
So I went back because I was actually curious to see what their actual last interaction was. And I could be wrong about where the Lincoln Memorial scene is. Do you remember what episode that is? Like what number?
It's 6, I think.
Okay, so further back, past that, they do, so there's the bottle episode where June takes the swipe at her, and then she doesn't report her. but she sees that there's something wrong with her and she's concerned. And then the next interaction we get is the ceremony, the terrible ceremony at the Lawrences, where Serena is pretty much just disgusted and had enough with Fred, because it's after that where she says, hey Fred, let's go to Canada, I know someone. And so I'm thinking she was had enough of Fred and all his bullshit, including what he did to June, and he was like sticking around, and it was all like this weird June thing, and Serena knew that. But I did go back just to see if at any point, because there is a clear point in that bottle episode where June's like, I'm gonna save the children, and that becomes her mission from the rest of the season. I wanted to see if she ever told Serena any idea of this plan, or in any way. She doesn't, but we do get that bottle episode hospital Natalie scene afterwards.
Thank you. I had them do-si-doed in my head as to the order of appearance, so thank you for that. So I don't know, I still read it as vindictive though, because that smile seemed less like, in her eyes it seemed like there was less awe and more of just like a, cool, you're gonna get your comeuppance, they're gonna catch you and they're gonna murder you, and you're going to get your payback for all of the strife that you've caused my family and me, because Serena is a very selfish human being at her core.
Yeah, I could see selfish, but I just didn't see that. I think she really is just impressed with her, but we'll see. It's too hard. It's too early to tell.
I hope that's the case, that it was a look of envy.
Yeah, because to me, I think that Serena's just really put aside all of that Gilead. That's all I took away from this entire scene, is she wants nothing to do with Gilead.
I don't think it was so much like her having or wanting to have anything to do with Gilead, and more just looking at it from a selfish standpoint of like, June has caused my family so much strife and misery and me so much anxiety, and she's the reason that my husband and I don't get along anymore, because like he's in love with her. And like I can see Serena reverting back to those sort of like selfish vindictive behaviors extremely quickly.
I'm curious as to what Serena's, I don't know if we'll ever get this answer, but in this moment here, I'm just curious as to where her head's at with Nichole at this point. Like, is she still on campaign, let's get Nichole back, or is she kind of given that up? That's what I'm curious about, because to me, if she's still on like this whole campaign to get her daughter back, then I think she's always been pretty cognizant, despite the fact that it's her baby. I think she is appreciative of the fact that June facilitated the birth of this child, so to speak. So I don't know. I guess in that sense, I just feel like she does. I don't think she sees June as hurting her family as much as giving her the baby she's always wanted. And losing Fred in the process, which I think at this point Serena's okay with. June can have Fred if that's what she wants.
She needs to wash that man right out of her hair.
Yeah. But you know what jumped out at me at this scene, as Fred was like full on spin mode, is it started thinking about like, okay, so he's clearly on the like free the stolen children of Gilead campaign, and this is what we're gonna see from Fred. You know who will be a really interesting testimony that I would love to hear more for if we get that chance in all these debates? Kiki, Rebecca. Because, you know, we talked about how like Tuella's like, oh, they're getting reunited with their families, but to me, Rebecca is the fluke in that situation, that she gets off the plane and her father's standing right there. Because, like you said, most of these kids, their real families are probably dead. They probably, or still in Gilead. So the chances of them being in Canada are so small. But we do know that Rebecca was old enough to be able to recount what happened. She can talk about her life in Gilead. She can talk about how she got out of Gilead. And she knows her father and recognized him. So she remembers her pre-Gilead life to some extent as well. So I'm just curious if she'll come back in any of this theoretical war tribunal that we'll see.
I hope so. Also, side note, thinking about the different Gilead or the different American families that had their children ripped away to become children of Gilead, that those children are now transplanted into Canada, that the parents might not have survived, might not even made it out of Gilead. I have to believe that looking at the I'm going to believe in the better part of humanity here, which I know is a stretch.
What's happening here?
I don't know, man. I had a really good weekend. I'm feeling super positive. So let's just roll with it, and then it'll dissipate soon, I promise.
Okay.
When you look at Little America, you have this incredibly strong, intense network of Americans that are all displaced in Canada. You have that social service network. You have people that have worked within Gilead. I have to believe that there are going to be people that are in Little America that are going to step up and be like, hey, we can't find their kids. I'll foster this kid because like I know what they've been through and I don't have my child yet, but I can help. So like I think those kids will be well taken care of. I don't think it's going to be a matter of becoming like wards of the Canadian government.
No, I don't mean that at all. They'll be taken care of. They just won't be reunited with their biological families like Kiki was. And a lot of them won't have a memory of a pre-Gilead. You know, like most of them are so young. She was just in that age that because she got reunited with her father and recognized him, we know that she does to some extent remember her pre-life.
Oh yeah, I know what you meant.
Yeah, but I do think that we're getting set up for a lot of the ramifications of these children and this abrupt rehoming essentially. And I know we talked about it in season 3 when June was coming up with this plan of a lot of these kids aren't going to know anything else, and you're ripping them from their families in the same way your child was ripped. And of course I understand her reasoning, and I'm not saying it's not what's best for these children, but in the moment it is going to be a traumatic adjustment for them.
Mm-hmm. You know what else is going to have some ramifications that Fred and Serena aren't even aware of yet? The fact that Rita was one of those Marthas.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see them find that out.
Oh, that's going to be divine.
Yeah, and we do know based off of those little blips that they've been posting on Instagram that we do have a Rita reunion with both Serena and with Fred. It's going to be so delightful watching that. So anyway, we can go back and forth as to the finer points of Serena and whether she was being vindictive or enviable until the cows come home, because we've literally done that for the last 3 seasons. So shall we next scene?
Absolutely.
We got a long season ahead of us.
Okay, so next scene, June is looking rather worse for wear as they're fleeing through the forest, pretty much in broad daylight, with the other handmaids. And she's truly suffering here. And apparently they're supposed to look for a lantern, but I mean, it's pretty much daytime. I don't think they're going to see it well. So June has to get closer.
I loved this because, like, again, whoever is strategizing for these handmaids is doing a great job. As opposed to walking in a tight group or walking in a singular line formation, they were spread out and staggered, which is very much a sort of militaristic walking pattern when you're walking through enemy territory. Usually, it's employed when you are like there's a potential for landmines or potential for snipers or potential for running into like another enemy militia, because if you're spread out well enough, it's harder for them to get all of you in one fell swoop. So whoever's dealing with the tactical side of this escape, good job, ladies. I also loved that once they get to the edge, they have a quick discussion, and the other handmaids are all looking like petrified, as they should, but also cautiously optimistic. And June immediately sallies up, is like, I'm gonna go, and almost like, no, you shouldn't. And June just doesn't even look back and says, I'm not sending someone else. Is willing to charge forward, is willing to understand that if this is not a safe place, they're looking for her first. They're looking for public enemy number 1. So don't endanger the other handmaids. Just, if this is not a safe place for them to be, let's just get this over with. And then she can get the medical help she needs. If it is a safe place, who better to send?
I think she's really feeling the weight of having them all in this with her, because this is because of her. It's a tremendous responsibility. And I think stepping up to go forth first, I mean, there's definitely some bravery there. There's no hint of manipulation in that decision to be the one to go first, because if she wanted to be manipulative about it, she could have been like, well, I'm the most important person in this operation, so who's more expendable? I'll send them first. She is taking full responsibility for her actions right now by taking the first steps towards that farm, which looks like something Stephen King would write about. Like, wow, spooky.
I know.
It was really great.
Yeah, they laid the scene in thick. So it definitely looks like a little bit dilapidated in the best of ways, and I think that's because of the intentional cool lighting choice that they made. It definitely gives it that sort of like spooky Stephen King vibe. The raven cawing in the background as she's making that approach as well really just lays it on thick. And she makes the approach and sees a heavily dressed up guardian, and holds up a lantern. So we know that this is presumably the safe place, but June is still trepidatious and doesn't let her guard down fully. He asks, "You're from Boston?" She nods wearily. He said there'd be more of you. And she kind of like signals a little, like turns her. I think this is when she turns around and signals with her bloodied hand. I'm assuming since there was like what looked like a square there, that she had put a marker on her hand so that way she could like signal if it was safe or not safe to them looking on.
I thought, okay, thank you for talking about this, because I couldn't figure out what was up with this red rectangle, and I thought it was the blood soaking through her bandage or something, and when she put her hand up. And I was like, did she paint her hand like that in a rectangle, or is it because she was walking and holding her bandage? And now she's got an imprint.
Like that, Scarlett. That's a really unique way of looking at that. Never occurred to me, but I see what you're saying. No, I saw what you're saying, Roxy. That seemed pretty intentional. So I don't know what she used, but some kind of cloth of something, and yeah, it was a signal. But I see what you're thinking, Scarlett. That's a perspective I hadn't thought of.
No, I definitely thought about that as well, because it's like it's on the hand that she held up would have been on the same side as her wound, so like definitely super plausible. But because it was such a clear like attempt at a rectangle, for me it was like, this has got to be a signal of some persuasion. And what else are you going to use? But you've got plenty of blood hanging around, so
gets the job done.
Yeah. So she signals for them to come, and the guardian asks, are they okay? She nods yes. Are you okay? She nods yes, wearily. And it's not until he says, you're safe, that she allows herself to collapse.
It's like it just took every ounce that she had in her to get these people to the safe house, and that was it. Do you know what I thought, though? For half a second, as the scene was playing out the first time I watched it, when June first is told that she's safe, and she looks down for a second, I actually thought when she started to pass out that she was gonna pull a Rita and kiss the ground the same way Rita did when she landed in Canada. And then I was like, oh, nope, she's going down. Nope. She's going down. It was
that's
so funny. I was laughing at myself because I really thought that's what was happening for just a second.
No, I did too. I'm with you on that. And surprise.
Oh, that would have been a really nice hat tip to Rita, but yeah, no, just straight collapse.
It wouldn't have quite worked in the scene because she's still in Gilead.
Yeah.
But she still is in a safe place within Gilead. So, but yeah, so she collapses. Everything gets very foggy. The way that they put that sort of soft filter on everything to like really mimic that idea of her slipping in and out of consciousness was really well done. And when she's in this state is when she gets to meet Esther.
And what jumped out at me strangely right before, like when all this is happening, this is where we get the title screen. I was like, what time is it? What time is this title screen coming in? It was the weirdest thing because I always mark it in my notes and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, we haven't had that yet?
Yeah.
It's 14 minutes in.
Oh my God, they pulled a Stranger Things.
Oh, you're right. It is that show that
God
does
damn
that.
it.
Yes, you're
Freaking
right.
Stranger Things was a bane to stoners everywhere because you'd be sitting there watching that fucking show and 20 minutes in, then you get like the opening credits and you're like, whoa, wait, what? Like you lose yourself in space and time for a second. I swear they did that on purpose.
You're completely right. And that's, oh man, they did it here. It was so far in and multiple scenes. We were in Canada with Fred and Serena and now we're back in Gilead with June. And it's like, okay. And now that we've caught you up, we've bridged the seasons, we can start now. Meet Esther.
That's exactly what it was. Yeah, that's exactly what it was. It was also like letting the viewer know like that June's safe, everything's safe, everything can progress now. So now we can officially start season 4. Mm-hmm. I fucking loved it.
Yeah.
This introduction to Mrs. Keyes or Esther is something else. Because in the haziness, June must have been really like, what is this bitch even saying to me right now? When June says, June, and she says, I know, you're the one I've been waiting for. You got all those children out. He sent me dreams of you. We were killing people together. Yay. And like, oh man, her glee over this is disturbing. Like Brianna and Alma are looking at each other like, what the fuck? they were the most wonderful dreams. Like, oh boy, if there was ever a question about whether or not it was the right decision to get these kids out of Gilead, look no further than this example right here. And June is going into shock and fades right after Esther tells her to get rest.
That must have very much felt like an out of the frying pan and into the fire situation
Yeah.
for these girls, because you are in a place that is supposed to be safe, and now you have this what looks like a child dressed in wives' clothes talking about killing everyone together and taking absolute glee in it. And your first the first thought that they must be having is, what the fuck kind of psychopath's house did we end up in?
No shit. Where are we right now?
Any port in a storm, though.
That's pretty much how I felt about her. Couldn't wait to find out more about this character, and I was like, I don't know if I want to see more of this yet. Yeah, she was a little alarming.
I also felt good about the friendly guardian here, like in the safe house. I just think it's cool how these men came to help, and it just means that these are men who were not in support of what was happening to these women and girls. And it makes me feel better to know that they're not alone in this. And this does help their operation, because we know that men can get away with things in the society that women just can't. And that includes secret resistance operations. They have to be more covert than the menfolk, because the men are practically invisible as long as they're not caught or no one rats them out. So they have a pretty ideal position if they were to help people. It's much riskier for the women.
Absolutely. Speaking of women in high-risk situations, shall we cut to Aunt Lid's?
Yes!
Oh my gosh, was this fun.
This is so fantastic. Oh my God. So Aunt Lydia has obviously been through some shit. And she's still got those teeth, though. Whoever it is, I think it was Calhoun, who I only know because I just finished season 3, and that is Natalie's rapist baby daddy. He says, Aunt Lydia, you've spent 2 weeks being interviewed by the eyes. And she corrects him. 19 days, the interview, Commander. It was a bit more than 2 weeks. And Putnam and the other ones, they just look unfazed, like, yeah, oops, my bad, sorry, 19 days. And the council is letting her off, apparently, and she's not going to be disciplined in this matter. And then our friendly neighborhood Calhoun says this is not an exaggeration or an exoneration. And these kids were taken under females who were under your charge. And I'm like, females. It's a very incel way of putting that. Very nice. And Lydia, I really always appreciate her wordplay, because she knows exactly how to walk through these minefields that are conversations with commanders. You know, she immediately puts it back on him, like, you know, well, I wouldn't be here without your mercy. It's you know, because of you and your mercy. And Incel Man says your frailties were also taken into consideration, because he couldn't miss an opportunity to point out her shortcomings and any way to undermine her and her position. And Lydia visibly twitches over that. And she recoups and says, how empathetic of you, sir. But what was on the inside really was a go fuck yourself, little man. And, you know, Lids turns to leave and he says, handmaids, sinful whores, more trouble than they're worth. And, oh, God, I hate this guy so much. So he's saying this out loud, and we all know that this is what men think of women in general in Gilead. But for Aunt Lydia to be hearing this when she has been as close as one can get to the real experience of being a handmaid, because she has provided them with the template for their pain and suffering. She's been the perpetrator of it. It's like she was the mother of all these women, but a mother who was also trying to survive in an abusive relationship. We know her backstory from the Testaments. Shit rolls downhill, and she was just going for self-preservation and what little power it afforded her in this man's world. And this definitely insults her. Like, and I don't know if she was insulted because it was a jab at the work that she's done for Gilead, so her pride was wounded, or she can't believe these men would deride how much these handmaids have given up to be of service to Gilead and to God.
Both.
I think it was both. This is definitely a both thing, because you know that she, in spite of her treatment of them, she does have a soft spot for her girls, as she calls them. So this is like he was insulting her children.
Absolutely. And Aunt Lydia, bless her for all of her faults, is sharp as a tack and incredibly fast-witted, and understood immediately that this was an opportunity for her to, instead of skulking away, or effectively skulking away like a wounded animal to lick her wounds and recoup to fight another day, after leaving that pulpit, to turn around and put all of these men in their place and reclaim her position of power after 19 days of quote unquote interviews by the guardians, which we all know is torture, as we can see by the fact that she's a bit rough and ready. And she leans very well into this. Just the right amount of rage, just the right amount of blame placement, a little bit of a biblical reference in there. Like, I love that she says that they were led astray by a Delilah. Are you too familiar with Delilah?
Yes, I went on the best rabbit hole with this.
Oh, did you? Okay, I'll just give like a quick.
You go first.
Okay, so Delilah is she's so first off, Delilah is a Hebrew name. It means delicate, which is, you know, first off, it's a Hebrew name, so it's you're talking a competing religion, so bad in the world of Gilead. But she's mentioned in the book of Judges in the Hebrew Bible. She was married to Samson, who was a Nazarite. And Delilah is bribed by the lords of the Philistines to figure out what the source of Samson's power is. Eventually finds out that it's from his hair, which a lot of people, side note, that read the Bible through there's people that will read the Bible and take it literally, and people who will read the Bible and take it metaphorically. The people that read it metaphorically will equate the length of a man's hair with his strength in the physical realm, and the length of his beard as strength and knowledge in the spiritual realm, which is why you always see biblical people like with long hair and long beards, always men, and why women can only have long hair in the physical realm, but they don't have beards because they can't possibly have knowledge of the spiritual realm. All of the patriarchal eye rolls. So she eventually finds out that Samson gets his power from his hair. She orders the servant to cut his hair off. Then she's able to turn him over to the Philistines. And in Christian interpretations, she's viewed as a Philistine prostitute. Who says that men should avoid marriage to those outside their faith, lest instead of love of one spouse, there be treachery. She's often considered to be a pleasant evil, at once a honeycomb and a poison. She's often viewed as being similar to Judas, because she does betray Samson and does it over pieces of silver. There are some people that will paint her in a sympathetic light, but really she's just the bulk of Christianity views her as an evil temptress.
Good. I meant to look that up. Thank you for filling me in there.
Got you covered. Scarlett, what did I miss?
Well, after he was taken by the Philistines, that whole like hair cutting thing, it worked for a minute, but he ended up growing his hair back really quick and subsequently destroyed a city and thousands of people because yay, Old Testament. Not really sure where Delilah ended up, but she has been known as an infamous harlot and temptress ever since, because thanks patriarchy. And this is where I rabbit holed a bit and managed to tie it into World War II, and I'd like to thank the History Chicks podcast, because without them, I wouldn't even know who Hedy Lamarr is, because the classic movie version of this that came out in 1949 starred Hedy Lamarr, who is not only a successful actress and quite possibly the most stunning woman who ever lived, but she was also responsible for developing a frequency hopping signal that would make it so American torpedoes could not be jammed in World War II. And her discoveries are considered the bedrock of our wireless communication today. We have smartphones and Bluetooth because of her work, and we ended up in a place that has nothing to do with The Handmaid's Tale, but let's just all appreciate her for a moment, because none of us would be watching this show without her accomplishments in the tech world, and her acting career definitely overshadowed her contributions to the 20th century, and the fact that she was a woman in this male-dominated field cannot go unnoticed.
That is so cool.
Right? That was the best rabbit hole I've gone down in a while. I was like, yeah, Hedy.
Oh, I'm so glad that you brought that up too, because I went slightly down that rabbit hole as well.
Did you? Yay.
Yes, and she did all of that in an entirely covert setting as well. She operated fully underground as a spy as well. Like, it's astounding, and it's such a wonderful dear listener, if you have not heard of Hedy Lamarr, her name is spelled it's Hedy Lamarr. Look her up. Like, the fact that her name is not commonplace is such a damn shame. But she's a woman that like operated underground in very much a man's world and accomplished so much to benefit our world as we know it.
Yeah, she was cool. Go look her up.
Yeah, that definitely was one of the other things that made me think like this Delilah reference wasn't just a matter of like referencing like a famed harlot, said with all the eye rolls, but also like as this show is apt to do, giving little hat tips to things if you're just willing to like look for the second or third connection, case like the white like how we've gone down the white roses.
Yeah,
These things are littered throughout this show, and it's such a treat to find them.
It is.
Lids says they were those girls were good girls that were led astray by a Delilah, and she has eluded your soldiers for 19 days. Is where she really starts to lean into replacing the blame on these men who can't accomplish fuck all. While she was busy getting tortured, they still have not found her. She is out there planning who knows what atrocities to rain upon our good nation. Like, just leaning into this entirely and just being like, find her and bring her to me, and you will help a frail old woman sleep better at night.
I will leave you to your work.
Yes, it's just so good, and completely taking back the reins of control.
Yeah.
And making it abundantly clear where she actually stands in this hierarchy of power and how necessary she is to their success.
Yep. And everything that she says it like she knows that they don't actually do anything.
I know.
She is so aware of that. But she spins it like, I'm but a frail old woman, and I'm going to leave you to your important work, whatever the fuck that is, because nobody knows what it is. Because it's women that make the world go round here in Gilead, regardless of whether or not you want to give us credit for it.
I know. Well, so in the beginning of the scene, when Putnam is, starts off, and then she corrects him and says it's 19 days, she forces him into an apology, which is her first. I don't know if it was a misstep or intentional, and with Lydia, entirely could have been intentional, because she seems to have had a really firm grasp on every word she was using throughout the scene. So I hesitate to call it a misstep for Lydia, but she does force him into an apology, which kind of, to me, like flared up Calhoun, because it could have just been Putnam speaking and that would have been the end of it. But then Calhoun had to kind of step in and make his dig, and that's when they went back and forth. But Calhoun's dig about her being frail is point of contention for Lydia. It seemed like it was in season 3 when she was injured after that attack on Emily. I mean, obviously it hurt her ego with her whole like trying to raise up these handmaids to be these upstanding citizens of Gilead, but it also really physically took a toll on her. And we saw, I still don't think I have an entirely firm grasp on what was happening with Lydia throughout season 3, but I think a lot of it came down to the fact that she doesn't want to appear frail. And so she triggers Calhoun by making the men apologize, then he triggers her by calling her frail. And you don't trigger Lydia because she's going to win every day when it comes to words with these idiots.
You're not going to know it, but she will win.
She will win. Oh, she's such a master of words. I have so much fun watching her speak.
Truly. Yeah, she is a wordsmith, and to see all of these men completely underestimate her as they do time and again, and for her to come off of 19 days of torture.
I know.
And be able to jump right back into being just a true wordsmith, and putting herself back into that position, or setting herself to be back into her position of power immediately she is such a tenacious woman in every regard. Like, it's regardless of whether or not you agree with how she is operating, you have to envy her tenacity.
Exactly. We are fully aware of the fact that Aunt Lydia is basically an overseer. We are so completely aware of that. No one is being, we're not being Aunt Lydia apologists by any stretch of the imagination. We're just stating facts. Yes, she fucking sucks. She has done terrible things. We are not disputing that.
100%. But I have a new feeling for season 4 with Lydia after seeing this episode, and after seeing, I want to talk about it now. I was going to save it till the end of the episode, but this is the only Lydia scene we get in this episode, so let's just do it here.
Absolutely.
So what I'm thinking is, so she talks about this interview, quote unquote interview, with bruises on her face. This frail woman was treated so kindly. So 19 days of torture. I'm wondering if this is the time where she almost believed. And in those 19 days, she has had her Lydia reckoning. So that was really where my brain was going. And I'll try not to fall down too many rabbit holes of what ifs until we see something. But the only reason I bring it up here is because did you see the end of this episode? Not the end of the episode. Did you see the coming up this season on clip? Did you watch all the way through to the screener at the end?
I don't know if I did.
I didn't. I stopped at
Okay. Okay, great. So I'm not gonna...
There was something after the credits?
So there is, yes. If you watch all the way to the end of the credits, they have like that season preview where it's like, it doesn't really say what you're seeing. It's not a next episode on. It's definitely like a coming up on this season. And it's basically an extended trailer of what we've seen. Yeah. Guys, I think we see Judd. I feel so firmly we see Judd. Like, I could be way wrong. It's just a dude, but it's the dude who's interrogating her. And I think we're getting flashbacks to her quote unquote interview, or we could even be getting flashbacks to her beginning of her aunt, at the beginning of her becoming Aunt Lydia, her capture, yes. So I'm not sure what we're seeing, but he's definitely interviewing her of some sort, and it's a man we've never seen before, and goddamn if that's not Judd.
Oh, holy balls.
Holy shit. Okay, part of me is very glad that I didn't see that because I'm trying to go into season 4 with as few blips on the radar screen as possible. Like, I want to go into this as blind as humanly as one can, because every piece of information that we get is going to affect our opinion as we move forward. But that is wild.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you spot that. Something we would see anyway. Like, you know what I mean? It's not. I don't think it's a spoiler. It's what would play at the end of the episode, and you would watch it. You wouldn't turn it off.
Of course, yeah.
So new scene, June wakes up to the sound of chickens and cows, and this made me miss my bed so much. She is still hurting. Also relatable, because when I watched this, I was coming off of Saturday night service, and I was fucking exhausted and also hurting. And she says, I used to think of my body as an instrument for the accomplishment of my will. I could use it to run, pick things up, make things happen. There are limits, of course, but my body was nonetheless one with me. It obeyed my commands, mostly without complaint. Not anymore. Well, girlfriend, welcome to your 40s. She accelerated that aging process a little bit with all the shit that she's been through. I just feel like that every day. We've got bloody rags. She says, now there's tending to be done. There's homemade penicillin, mold scraped off of rotten fruit. And did either of you guys Google how to do this? Like, holy shit, like what a process if you want to attempt any level of safety, but it can be done.
Oh, that's literally
also
how I
cool.
Made the drink. I was like, how do you make penicillin? And the first thing that came up was how to make penicillin cocktail. And I was like, oh, fucking course. I'm such a dumb bartender.
No, you are not a dumb bartender. I thought that was fucking brilliant. I didn't even know there was a such thing as a penicillin cocktail. So
yeah, this is my homemade penicillin.
That is fucking awesome.
This one's surprisingly easy, but making penicillin from fermented fruit, not so easy.
Oh yeah, that was a whole thing. I was reading up on that, and I'm like, okay, good to know. In case of, collapse of civilization, which we're pretty much actively into, so, maybe you guys want to look this up at some point. Just saying. I thought it was awesome. And then she's talking about the salve that she's putting on. She says there's comfrey and marigold oil to make the skin heal. I also know how to make that. And also, ew, this wound care is pretty gross. Like, she definitely almost died. I'm really surprised that she's alive. She's the cat with 9 lives.
Well, they even say that she was told that she almost died of sepsis, and that she called out to Hannah, which she doesn't remember, which is definitely something that happens quite often when people are dancing on the precipice of death. For me, hearing that line that she called out to Hannah, to bring in a socially relevant tie-in, reminded me of reports of George Floyd calling out for his mother right before he died. Someone who was extremely close with, that was taken away from him. He apparently really never got over the trauma of losing his mother, and his dying words were calling out to her. So hearing that June, as she's dying of sepsis, or almost dying of sepsis, is calling out to Hannah, kind of just drives home that point of just how deep that damage is.
Thank you for pointing that out. I was just thinking today, because as of right now, it's April 12th when we're recording, and we're like, what, a month long into the Derek Chauvin trial?
This is today was the start of week 3.
Okay, Christ, it just blows my mind that this, and I understand, like, there's due process. I get it. He has the right to a fair trial, but it's just absolutely crazy that this is going on for as long as it is when the whole goddamn thing is on video.
Right.
It,
Right.
and they cannot dispute the actual event that caused his death. They can't. They
Yeah,
could talk
you're
about
right.
what he had in his system or what he did before. It literally doesn't fucking matter. The cops don't get to be executioners. They are not the executioners.
And it's attempted character assassination as well
Yes.
to justify the excessive use of lethal force.
Yep. But typical. Also entirely expected. You know what I was thinking about when Janine was saying that, or she says that Janine was saying she was talking to Hannah while she was in and out. I was wondering, like, were those images in the trailers just a recurring dream that June had of Hannah in a box? Like, what if that doesn't actually happen? I don't think that would be cool, though, if they actually went that way. It would be
Interesting
very
thought. Yeah.
cheesy, like a la, Dallas. That wasn't, yeah, that was a thought. I was like, because I don't want Hannah to be in a box of any sort. I don't want that whole scenario, whatever is happening in those trailers. I don't want that to be a thing. It just seems completely, like, just beyond fucked up.
Less inclined to think that that's what's going on, and more inclined to think that we're going to have to deal with seeing Hannah in a glass box.
I'll be drinking Everclear that day.
I know.
Anyway, so June starts talking about pain and how pain makes your world very small. My world has been this room. Today I venture forth. My world can't be small. Not now. And then she goes on to talk about how Gilead will constantly be hunting her. Gilead is not afraid. It does not sleep. It keeps searching for us. It will keep searching for us forever. There's no more time for me to stay in bed.
And
Mama's got work to do.
Exactly. And she is absolutely assuming the responsibility of all of them now.
Mm-hmm.
I get wanting to stick together, but also she is being presumptuous. I think. I mean, like, yeah, I feel like in her mind, she is establishing herself as a leader, and she has for a while. She's obviously the person that gets things done. But I am waiting at some point for one of these women who have been with her since the beginning to eventually say, this is not working anymore and this is bullshit. And I definitely get the feeling that this is going to start to happen after this episode.
There's a bit of foreshadowing to that as well. But we'll get to that on the back half.
Mm-hmm. She walks out into the barnyard after this, and there's lots of things going on. Like, this is a bustling little farm. We've got handmaids now. They're dressed as Marthas. And Janine walks by with a friggin' pig. She's got a pig buddy now. And she says, Mr. Darcy, say hello to June. And Mr. Darcy doesn't care. He's like, no way. I know that chick will eat me. June spots Alma across the field, so she follows her. And Alma just bringing the normal back. Holy crap, it lives. She's just snarky and perfect. And I missed that so much. And June wants the lay of the land, literally. She wants to know how far they can see on a clear day. Alma's thinking 5 or 6 miles. I'm thinking, how does one gauge such a thing? Because I don't know how you gauge distance by sight. How do you do that?
So if you were on a completely clear plane, because of the curvature of the Earth, you could see approximately, I think it's like 6.2 miles.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that how that works? Like the horizon is 6.2 miles away?
Approximately, yeah.
No
if
shit.
You're on a fully clear plane, there's nothing else like happening. Like the ocean is probably the best place to do it on a very clear day because like you only have like 1 or 2 foot variances, maybe 4 foot variances at most. But yeah, I believe it's just over 6 miles. So for her to say that you can see 5 to 6 miles on a clear day says to me that they're in a rather hilly place and that they're relatively elevated and can see over any other hills. Because if you're just standing in the middle of the woods looking out, you're never going to be able to see that far.
Yet another thing I need to take notes on. This is excellent. Okay, this is how you judge distance. This is how you make penicillin. This is how you make Scarsav. Okay, we got this. We can do it, guys.
By our powers combined, we might be able to survive like 2 weeks.
Yep. Anyway, so June is still hurting, and apparently, aside from mustardy yellow pus, she is just dandy. And yeah, I don't. Mustard yellow pus, that does not sound like some great healing that's
No,
happening.
I'm like slightly on edge throughout this episode as they keep referencing her wound. And part of me wants to just say thank you to the show for leaning into the fact that recovery takes time and it's not just you blink and she's healthy. But part of me is also a little worried that there's some underlying problems with the healing process happening with June. So I'm just not sure what it is here.
So I didn't take it as underlying problems. I took it as this is how long these sort of things take to heal anyway. I mean, like, so I have a big old cut on the back of my foot that's been there for 9 days. With modern medicine and with like Neosporin, it still has not scabbed over yet. And it's not a puncture wound, it's not a gunshot wound. These sort of things do take time. People that have been in military style conflicts, that have been shot with non-fatal gunshot wounds or have been stabbed, over 90% of them discuss having problems and still being in part of the healing process up to 6 months out. So this is a totally normal like time frame for the healing process to occur. Especially when you're not dealing with septic sort of situations, like you're in a farmhouse dealing like with homemade penicillin that you're ingesting in some sort of weird tea, and a salve that's made with marigolds. She's making the best of what she can, but it didn't strike me as bizarre that it was taking this long.
So this is a thing where I realized while I was watching this episode, I was getting kind of like hung up on like these little clues about like where they are and what time of year it was and stuff. And then I was like, you know what? It's fucking irrelevant. They're telling an amazing story. Because I was realizing, like, okay, we're going from snow to green trees and milkweed in the matter of 3 weeks. And I'm like, New England weather is erratic, but not that level erratic. And also, they filmed this in a pandemic. So what the fuck can you do? And the fact that they managed to pull this off during a pandemic must have been insane. It really must have been incredibly difficult for them to have to constantly do this, the constant like quarantining, constant testing. You got to make do with what you have. And if you're filming in a certain time in a certain place, you just go with it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I kind of quickly was like, this detail doesn't matter. There's snow on the ground and they're outside and I don't care what time of year it is.
Very much inclined to agree. It felt like this was like one of the later scenes that they filmed because of that, because of the weather, or perhaps one of the earliest ones. Who even knows? But yeah, ultimately it didn't matter. Like, one would imagine that there would have been several rewrites to account for people not being able to get into the country, several rewrites for people still being like quarantining or not being able to be present for filming, and like they of course had to change things around. There's going to be narrative liberties that they're going to have to take with the cinematography, as well as with the storyline, because #thanks COVID.
And the cinematography, I'm still digging it because I'm telling you, this is like New England farm and then some. It's just so perfect.
It is.
June brings this bucket into the house. She hears banging around. And it's this old ass commander in the other room just staring out the window, banging his cane. We don't really see his face. Not very well, anyway. And she says, "Blessed day, Commander Keyes." And he just walks away. He like looks at her and just, bye-bye. Walks away. Okay. That's weird. Because in her last house, which was extremely unorthodox, at least the guy would talk back. At least she had an idea that this guy was at least a little bit on their side. Here's this complete rando who doesn't even talk, but he has a house full of, all of a sudden has a house full of like completely illicit Marthas. Like he doesn't even say a word about it. Like, okay.
Right? I know. I thought there was shades of Larry and the fact that it's different than we're accustomed to seeing, and that feels ominous. But I think by the end of the episode, we get a much more full picture. It's not Larry, but it did bring me right back to season 3 of like, oh, new household, and we know things are operating differently, but we still don't really know what the deal with this guy is. But I do like that she really spent some time staring as he walks away as to what he was watching, and then goes right out to the courtyard to see exactly what he was watching. Little Esther.
Oh, hey, if anybody's wondering who the hell Larry is, we call Commander Lawrence Larry, Irreverent Larry specifically, through much of season 3, because
I know.
why not?
I forget that people don't call him Larry at this point.
Yeah.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Yep. So Larry is Joseph Lawrence. There you go. Now you know. Or do you have anything to say about this, Roxy?
I mean, it's a bit ominous and it's a bit looming, but at first I was kind of taken aback because he's just clumping around with his cane, but mystery is solved by the end of the episode anyway, so I don't think there's any need for us to, pontificate too much further on that. Especially when we have the full proper introduction to little psycho Esther.
Right? Like, she looks like she is roughly 10 years old, and she's actually 14 in real life, but not much better. And she just goes running up to June and hugs her and says, "Blessed be the fruit, you're awake."
And then flicks the cigarette that she's smoking out in public.
Okay, so this is the rabbit hole I went down pretty much right here at this scene. It was a little bit further with the dialogue, but we had talked a lot in season 3 about who you would be if you were in Gilead Scarlet and who you would be Roxy. And I don't think I ever really got a full picture of who I would be. I knew I would be a handmaid of some sort because I'm fertile, but that's as far as and I knew I wouldn't cut it as any kind of wife because I'm too sinful. But we've talked about Scarlet being June, and we've talked about Roxy being Moira. And then I saw Mrs. Keys and I went, fuck, I'm her. I'm so her. I would be that nervous little flitting thing at the farm on the outskirts who's just waiting for Scarlet to show up so I can be like, hey, can we go fight? I really want to take down some men. I hate Gilead and I wish you had hadn't taken so long to get here, but you're here now, so let's go because Roxy's already in Canada. Like, I would be that one on the outskirts, like smoking the cigarette. That's me. Like, her mannerisms was so me. And then the episode played out and I was like, I don't want this to be me.
Oh my God.
But then I was like, it's my kid, and that's a whole different rabbit hole. But
Right?
yeah, just her mannerisms and the way she was like, just felt like she was just waiting for Mayday to show up, and that would be me.
I thought it was interesting that she was smoking. Like, she's clearly nervous. She's got a lot of nervous energy. And like, she's smoking, and I'm like, what the hell happened there? Like, that is peculiar in itself. Like, I expect that from an older wife. I was even surprised when Serena would smoke because it just, the two things never seemed like they went together. But I just don't expect it from someone so young. She's like all of like 12 or something like that. And she's, smoking a cig. Not that that's weird or anything. I've known plenty of people in my life who've been that young and were smokers, but it just seems very out of place here.
I felt like it felt very in place for the outskirts rural area. Like, that's what the vibe it felt like to me, of just like, she has nothing else to do out here but smoke on this cigarette. It's like her one vice. That what other kind of, obviously there's the whole Gilead context, but that's the vibe it felt like to me, was just, she's just anxious and smoking because she has nothing else to do.
Ooh, see, I love what you're thinking with that. I saw it as like, what else is a 14-year-old girl going to be doing to try to make herself look more mature, make herself look older than she is, and smoking. I mean, how many times I think I started smoking, so I was like, this is what adults do. It's something that, like, a lot of people often have, like, when they first start smoking, have this misconception that adults smoke. This is going to make me look more mature and more adult-like. So immediately upon seeing her standing in the middle of all this, smoking her cigarette brazenly, I was like, she's trying to look like she belongs in this role.
You
are so right.
Yeah, because that's exactly what she's doing through the rest of the scene. Oh, that's a great point.
So she definitely, like, it's that whole notion of, like, wanting to look more mature, wanting to be more mature. And there's this thing that, like, adults that you respect do it. And, like, they look so cool. And, like, I'm doubling down on that, though, because she also, like, when she feels like she's being challenged by June, she stands up and she's like, I'm the mistress of this house. And it's just such a, like, a thing that, like, respect me, please. That's how it definitely came across. So
absolutely, you're right. And it's like her first conversation with June after she greets her too. She's trying to point out that she's noticed the drones and look at me being useful. I can contribute. I'm aware. It's 100%. You're right, Roxy. She's just trying to look like she's grown up and she is ready to fight.
She just wants to look cool in front of her hero.
Yeah. Which is another thing that I want to point out, because I hadn't really picked up on it on my first watch of this episode, but the more I watched it through, I'm really trying to think of the context of June in this angel flight that everyone is so astonished by. And June is quickly becoming a legend. Like later on, when she kind of just overrides Good Guardian and like helps her lift her to her feet, I'm like, damn, she is a legend. Like she is known as Mayday now to this girl who she shows up, and
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, June went from season 1 and 2 like so desperate to get her hands on anything Mayday to being known as Mayday when she shows
Yeah.
up at the door. It's so cool.
One thing that I found interesting was how, like, this is June's first time out and about. Like, she's been kind of like down and out for, we presume, almost 3 weeks. And so she's out and about and she sees this bustling activity. She sees all of her handmaids going in and out of the farm, like, square area where you could presume you'd be safer there within, the immediate confines of the farm property. And they're just out bustling, doing their thing. And that's got to be really disconcerting for her. And this little girl comes in here, like, balls out, like, all right, what's next? What are we going to do? Like, and June has restraint. And we waited for her to acquire that all throughout season 3, was that the acting at the right time, not being impulsive. And so she definitely has that now. And now they're just all out in the open. And that's why June is asking for things like, how far can you see? Okay, where are my people? My God, Elma's out walking a cow, God knows where. How do we know that we're safe here? And this little girl just wants to go all out and start getting things done. And June's like, hold the fuck up. Like, she has been kind of isolated on this farm. I have no doubt that she has had one hell of an experience, but it hasn't been the experience, I would think, of being hunted in quite the way that June has. So it's a difference in perspectives. And like, yeah, June is showing up and she basically is the face of Mayday right now. And I can see where this girl would be really, really pumped to meet her and be like, oh my God, my idol's here. Now let's go kick some ass. And she was probably very surprised by the fact that June is like, slow your roll. We got to lay low for a second. Like, it's not safe. They're looking for us. We can't be moving around. She's just not really getting it. Like, June's like, yeah, we will do the things, but it's not going to happen right now. We're not going to collect the guns right now and start taking out Gilead. Like, just calm down for 1 second. Like, the impulsivity is not helping. But she's young, and that's what she's going to do.
And I think we saw it in the first scene when we first get to meet Mrs. Keyes, and we see it really doubled down in this episode, that I think all three of us have kind of said the same thing, that we get this impression that something's off with her, that she's not quite there, and that she's a loose wire, that when you're talking about June and everything that she needs to do in order to keep all these people safe, you don't want someone like Esther running the ship in any way, shape, or form, because like you said, June's finally learned restraint and she'd like to use it. But then she says that line that what did she say exactly? She says to June, I thought you were going to die. I really did. And who says that in season 3? Eleanor to the Putnam baby. Remember? And it's super creepy. And you're like, who would say that to someone? And it sets off alarm bells in that situation if something's not right, when she just looks right at that baby. We thought you were going to die. We really did. I don't know if it's word for word, but that sentiment is there. And then to hear Esther kind of reiterating that same sentiment to June, it's like, it's just those alarms of, oh, that's just not something you say. She's definitely isolated. She's definitely a wild card, a loose wire in this entire situation of resistance, but covert resistance, and we're laying low because there's drones and such.
I love that point, by the way. That's amazing. But to make it more succinct, she's a liability.
Thank you.
And June has been presumably laid up in her room for the past however many weeks. We know it's been at least 19 days that she's been aloof. Who knows how long it took them to get to the safe house? Let's presume 2 weeks. Or rather, let's presume a week, and that she's been healing for 2 weeks. Just for, why not? The other girls have had a chance to kind of get comfortable with their surroundings, though, and kind of feel things out. And we see later on that none of them have actually had like a real conversation, it seems, with Esther, to kind of like gauge their surroundings. They've fallen very easily and quickly into this sense of security. And because they are also well at ease, that's got to be super disarming for June as well, because like she's several weeks behind the rest of them as far as like getting comfortable with this land, and none of them except for Alma are really going to be able to give her any answers. And even Alma is just like, yeah, this is fine. So it's got to be very jarring as someone who has had to think tactfully and tactically several times, like in life or death situations.
Also, I don't think that she realizes that June hasn't even thought this far ahead yet. She didn't think that she was going to get those kids on the plane. She didn't think that plane was going to take off. She also didn't think she was going to survive her gunshot. She shouldn't have. Like, why is she under the assumption that this was going to be a thing that was going to happen? Like, why is Esther figuring that just because June got these kids out and ended up on her farm, that fighting all of a sudden was going to ensue? Like, this is not how that works. Like, one step at a time, baby cakes. Like, just one step at a time.
Well, I think she's feels like there has been one step at a time, because for Esther, it has been. She showed up, but now she's been recovering, and she thought she was going to die, and then she didn't. And now she's out. So, okay, you're out. What's the plan? Like, she just wants movement, because as we're going to see moving forward, she just needs something to do, because she's spinning her wheels in a whole lot of trauma on this farm, and she just needs direction.
And she probably also sees the arrival of June and the other handmaids as an opportunity to change something in her life. And we find out later that she's gone through an immense amount of trauma, and that drive and need to do something to change the trajectory of her life is of course going to be insanely strong with her. So it's going to be harder for her to understand, to be pragmatic, and to be patient and allow June the time to heal. And like for her to say, like, if you weren't going to fight, then why did you come here? And like, June's still working on physically healing from this, and hasn't had time to formulate whatever the next step is going to be, because this is off the cuff at this point. So, oh, go ahead.
Oh, just that also we have to think about the fact that Esther has seen this group of quote unquote Mayday show up, and she has these ideas of what they're going to be like. June's been up in her bed, and she probably hasn't seen anything Mayday-like from any of the other people, because you've got Alma and Janine and company who seem quite content at their lot and safe. She probably looks at it as, why are they all just so content to sit here? At least when June comes out, she'll have a plan. And then June shows up and she seems content to sit there. And yes, it's only been 5 minutes, but I think that also is part of the issue, is that no one else seems intent on doing anything.
The other thing too is that June is also in a different place of processing this, because she's literally just met Mrs. Keyes. Mrs. Keyes. And she is so young, and she's so obviously vulnerable. And June is like wrapping her brain around the fact that her worst fears have been confirmed. This girl is not much older than her own daughter. And here we have her in this position of, she basically got sold off to a commander. She really is no better than a handmaid in some respects. She didn't have a choice in this matter, and she realizes that this is a thing that has happened to this child. So June is processing that. And she says as such, and she's just like, get over it. I am the mistress of this house. I'm stronger than you think. She wants to hold on to her, like, what little power she thinks she has. Because admitting that you have been hurt and used unfairly it's hard for somebody to come to terms with, and you don't feel very powerful when you're admitting that.
It's a very, very solid point. And when she is finally able to talk with June about her traumas, which, I mean, of course she's not going to talk with her about it straight away. Like, who the hell, like, within 5 minutes of meeting someone's like, hey, by the way, I've been gang raped.
Yeah, right?
That's a bit much information
Absolutely.
to throw on someone when you first meet them. But it does stand to reason that she's trying so desperately to have some sort of sovereignty, and some sort of sense of control in her life, that to not be offered any sort of answers would be insanely frustrating. That being said, at face level, it does just sort of look like, whoa, this kid's very intense, and like, slow your roll. But the more that you start to like look at it through a different lens, it's abundantly clear that she's a very tragic character straight away.
Yeah, it's hard for June to see that at this point. I think we have the benefit of understanding exactly where, or at least understanding more of Esther's plight on this farm. But in this scene here, I think, like you said, June's just starting to process who she is and what she's dealing with. And we know that wives do have some sense of authority. And as soon as Esther reacts by demanding that she be seen as an authoritative figure, June recognizes that that's what she wants, but she doesn't take her that seriously. She laughs at her. She smirks. She doesn't laugh at her, but she smirks as she kind of placates her. And that was a big tell to me that at that point, she's just trying to process still and placate this little wife who would like to feel like she has an important role. And June's starting to pick up what's happening on a very small level here, but I did appreciate that little smirk as she said, "Okay, Mrs. Keyes."
Same, definitely.
Okay. Are we going to talk any more about the scene? I don't have anything else. Well, this is where we're going to wrap up the first half of this episode. Join us back here for part 2 very shortly. And yeah, that's all I got. Thanks for listening.